to see you and your beautiful face again.
Thanks.
Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. The question that I've been asking all my former students, or the former students that have been doing this, and also some other adults, is what you wish you would have learned in school, or what you wish you could have invested more time in learning while you were in school.
Honestly, I think this is something that all schools talk about, like practicing individuality and all that. But honestly, I feel like it's really difficult to sort of appreciate yourself as an individual, especially when you're younger. Because I moved to Bridgewater in fourth grade.
Okay.
So like for the longest time, I was like, how do I fit in? And so everyone was like, just be unique. But I think it's not really touched upon socially what happens if you stand out. So something that was super hard to come to terms with was definitely realizing like, I can't be friends with everyone and not everyone's gonna like me. And especially in Hillside, everyone was like, oh, like, work hard, be kind. That one, I don't know, everyone got the work hard. I think the be kind one, it was subjective. At the time, I thought I was enjoying myself, but looking back upon it now, I'm like, I don't know, it felt so forced. And I'm not going to say that I got bullied. I don't think I necessarily got bullied, but I was definitely the target of a lot of like, oh, you didn't know this?
I imagine that still you're figuring out what your individuality really is.
Yes, definitely. Some of the people that I talk to these days, like, it's sort of like I don't really want to talk to them because I don't really agree with their, values or ideas, and it's hard for me to relate to them, but I see them every day, and so it's sort of like, is it really necessary to really want to keep a good relationship with this person? And it's sort of difficult for me because when I was younger, I craved validation, but these days I'm practicing it a little bit less. I'm quite proud of myself for that. So
you should be proud of yourself for that. What I think is also interesting is that we always tend to do like, well, when I get to the next place, then I'll figure it out more, right? Like when you were in fifth grade, you probably thought in middle school it'll be better. In middle school, you think in high school, but in high school you think college, and then you get to college, and you become an adult, and then it's always, we kind of always think the solution is in the future, whereas really it's in the right now. But you obviously feel one step closer to learning about who you are, right?
I really think it's also about the environment. This is actually interesting to talk about, but like SAT scores. These days, SAT is optional, thank God. But something that I learned this year was actually like, it's so sad that I learned it this year though. I wish I learned it sooner. But I think the people that I sort of surround myself in are just really top-notch smart. And I don't want to be stereotypical, but most of my friends are Asians, and I think I just sort of compared myself to the Asian standard, and I don't know, it was really harmful. It was really harmful. I've never really been in like an extraordinarily academically top Asian person. I'm quite average, I'd say, in that sense when we're talking about quote unquote Asian stereotypes. But like for the general population, yeah, I'm really smart. But this year I have a friend who isn't Asian that I actually became friends with this year, and we were talking about SAT scores, and I was like, yeah, my SAT score is so bad. Like, do you want to share scores? Because I don't really talk about my grades that much. They were like, yeah, like my score was this, which was a significantly lower score than mine. And I was in shock. I was like, oh my God, I was so busy realizing that everyone around me is like quote unquote better than me, that I'm also better than quote unquote better than some people. And it was really shocking me. I was like staring for a little bit, not to be rude, but it was more of like, oh my gosh, like I just remembered that like there's other people too. Like it's not just everyone above me.
We forget to be grateful for the progress we have made. And it's not about, and I know you don't mean it that way either, it's not about being better than or less than anyone else. But recognizing that there's always going to be people more skilled than you at certain things, and those that are still learning to be where you already are at. So it's just a kind of a perspective shift. I think you mentioned something super important, and I'm really glad that you even touched on it, is the the Asian kind of expectation. I think you referred to it as the Asian expectation versus everyone else. So why don't you explain or talk a little bit about what that even means?
Okay, the other name for, quote unquote Asian expectation is like model minority myth. Personally, I don't think it exists. I would say, yeah, like, sure, if you're an Asian, you think you fit into that category, that's great. You're smart, like, that's good. I'll give it to you. But for me personally, hearing people talk about the model minority myth, and they're like, the lowest score that, like, my parents want me to get is a 1,500. And I'm like, 1,500? Top score is 1,600, right? They'll be like, yeah, well, 1,500, it's not that great. And I was like, oh, that's so awkward. But I really think, like, there's no limits, like, this is not to bring race into anything, but, like, I have white friends, like, and they're quote unquote smarter than me. Their SAT scores are higher than mine. They get better grades than me. I go to them to ask for help.
Yep.
I think it's unfair to put such a moral pressure on
anyone.
Just anyone in general. It feels weird to say, like, oh, I'm the weak end of, like, the Asian academic.
I can totally understand that, because people don't always realize that when you have a positive stereotype, because that is a positive one, or it's meant positively, right, that all Asians are smart, or all Asians are good at math, they don't realize that with that comes a certain pressure and expectation that you want to live up to, and that can create that could create a lot of inner kind of self-doubt and imposter syndrome. A little bit.
Definitely. Oh my gosh. I mean, to be fair, everyone in the AP level is having imposter syndrome.
So how does that tie into individuality then? Like, you're trying to fulfill this Asian stereotype while recognizing that that's not who you are. So how do you, or you feel like that's not who you are, or maybe you feel you're not living up to it. How do you get to this place of realizing, well, then who am I in your individual identity?
I had, like, a whole vision for high school. I was like, I'm going to take all honors in 9th grade because I can finally take the harder classes I want to take. And I always felt inferior. I was like, oh, like, all my friends are in those classes. Like, I bet I could do the same. And so in 9th grade, I was doing honors bio. Just took pretty much all honors. And it destroyed me so much. Did I have an interest in French anyway, or was I just taking it because everyone else was taking it? That was the question that I asked myself a lot. And then sophomore year comes around, and it's COVID, it's online, and I have the absolute worst attention span inside my room. And I finally found out why. It's because you can't study and sleep in the same room. I wasn't necessarily lonely. It's just the environment was bad, I guess, But I hadn't cried in a while, like maybe like a little over a year, and I had someone message me at like 11:20 p.m. let's say, and the assignments are all due at 11:59, the classic,
right?
Like, hey, like, did you do the math homework yet? And it was like 150 questions, and I was like, oh crap, I forgot about the homework. And so I'm like, oh, like, how long did it take? And he was like, I don't know, like a couple hours. It's just a lot of questions, and I was freaking out. And then like for the first time in a year, I cried over math homework. I think that's when I realized, I was like, this is not okay. Like, the fact that I'm crying over something, like, it slipped my mind, and I was overreacting clearly, because why should I be crying over homework? It's just one grade inside of my sophomore year. When I realized, like, this is not okay, even if someone else is capable of doing it, that doesn't mean that I should force myself to handle something like that. And I dropped so many classes that year. Something that I struggled with a lot when I was younger, I'd force myself to hang out with people. Because I was like, if I don't hang out with people, I'm going to be the loser in the corner. And so I think this year, something that I'm really proud of myself for is I think I can tell people when I feel really socially drained. Actually, today, I messaged my friend. I was like, I'm sorry, like, like, I know that we were going to call, but, it wasn't today. I'm sorry. It was yesterday. And, like, I know we were going to call, but I genuinely just can't, like, I just can't deal with it right now. I'm really tired. I really just I need to chill in my room. They were accepting of it. They were like, okay, that's fine. Like, we'll just leave you alone. And I think that's when I realized, like, oh my God. I just thought that, I assumed that people would care, but they don't care. It's really up to you, and I think that's something I'm really upset that I couldn't learn earlier. But I think that's part of me sort of discovering individuality. It's more of, I don't need to try and be like everyone else. I think cliche, everyone's their own individual. But what's really more important is that you need to learn to prioritize yourself over other people sometimes. And it's okay to do so. I think everyone's for the I'm really altruistic, I'll help, but sometimes you need to sort of learn that you need to be altruistic for yourself as well. And that's really hard. It took me years.
How would you say that you learned to advocate for yourself and say and learn the language of, you know what, I'm a little socially drained today, I can't get together? And I 100% agree. I heard this quote, I think it was on TikTok, where things will change for you. Like, you'll stop worrying about what other people think once you realize that other people are not thinking about you. Other people are thinking about themselves, right? So you might as well prioritize yourself. How did you learn the language of, I'm socially drained, I'm not maybe mentally there today, or or just to speak up for yourself?
For me, it's sort of, I realized I was over the edge and I needed to do something about it. If I wasn't going to do anything about it, nothing would happen. I still struggle with it now, but I'm a lot better at it, obviously. In terms of how I finally came to it, is, it's really hard to talk about. Like, why? I think I can skip over some details. Basically, what happened last year was I ended up in the hospital, if that tells you anything. And so I think while, I was there, I sort of came to terms with, like, I just realized how badly I've landed myself in. Everything that I worked for just went down. Because when I was younger, I was like, if I act like everyone else, I can stop being boring. Because I considered myself really boring. Everyone was going to the mall. Everyone was wearing clothes that my parents were like, well, it's not really worth it. Like, you can always get cheaper things. But I didn't want that because no one else was wearing that. The pressure to fit in became so much that everything I was doing was destroying me. And I didn't come to terms with it until I was, laying in the bed. I was like, oh my God. So this is what happens when, like, you push yourself over the edge.
Why do you think it's so important that we do learn our individuality and that we do recognize that when we are having thoughts like you were having about, well, I just want to fit in, or I want to go socialize just so that I'm not the loser in the corner. I want to maybe not talk about my grades because I don't want to compare myself to others. Why is it so important that we stand firm in our own individuality and be comfortable with whatever that looks like?
When you're not passionate about something, you become so boring. Like, what you're interested in might not necessarily be something other people are interested in. When you push yourself to, like, think in someone else's, like, mind, sure, you can do that if you want to understand someone's views. Like, that's fine. But when you're forcing yourself to like something that you don't, you become so boring. You don't even know what you are. I think that's what really got me, because
you lose yourself in other people.
Everyone always wanted to go to movies. Personally, I don't. This is unpopular. I don't like movies. I like reading. I think movies, I hate suspense. Like, I need to go on Wikipedia to, figure out what's gonna happen before I watch a movie.
Spoilers.
Yeah, I personally really like spoilers.
Okay.
It helps me enjoy the movie more.
I bet you there's tons of people who agree with you. It's just that everyone is probably going with the majority, right?
When you're able to be passionate about something that you really like, it really brings out life. I have a lot of interest in MBTI. I'm such a big MBTI fanatic. When I'm talking about like the differences between the personalities or like each letter means, they always tell me like, "Oh my gosh, like the way you're talking right now, it's giving." It's a Myers-Briggs personality test. It sorts everyone into 16 personality categories. Personally, I'm an INFJ. If we go into that right now, we could be here for hours. But essentially, it really helps me understand people more, because I really like to understand people. I think that's what it is.
You like to understand people because you would also like to be understood?
Yes. Oh my god. I really want to understand people because when I was younger, I felt like no one could understand me. I don't know if that sounds sort of quote unquote pick me or not, but
Doesn't matter how it sounds. If that's your truth, that's your truth.
mm-hmm.
You also mentioned when we first started the conversation, the school motto at Hillside was work hard and be kind.
Yeah.
You thought that the be kind was a little subjective. Why is that?
First of all, you should be kind. That's I'm not saying you shouldn't. Yeah. I guess it felt superficial. I felt fake. Because I think everyone was craving validation. Everyone was like, oh my god, this is the new popular person. Let me go talk to them. And be nice to them. Because if I'm nice to them, then they'll probably be nice to me. And then I can hang out with them. And it sort of goes into if I'm nice to someone, then they have to like me. But that's sort of my personal opinion. It's a good motto, though. It's a good motto. I just think I might have been a little bit lonely, and I just took it the wrong way.
So let's say you were feeling lonely, right? You said you were feeling a bit lonely when you were in a Hillside. And so you made an effort to make friends. To me, that sounds like the logical thing to do. Are you suggesting that it's better to be lonely and honest as opposed to like being forced to go and be social? Or what do you kind of mean by that?
Humans are social creatures. You need to talk to someone at least a little bit in order to be healthy, I guess you can say. There are a lot of examples in textbooks like Katie is nice. She has a lot of friends. And I think that example is definitely something of more, if you're a nice person, that means you have to have friends. That means the more friends someone has, the more value they have, or the more moral value they have. And I think,
which is not true.
It's not true. It's not true. You don't have to have a lot of friends in order to be happy. I wouldn't say, I was feeling lonely, so I made friends. People feel lonely because everyone is acting like they're not lonely. I think everyone is lonely in a way.
But how do we change the narrative then that somebody doesn't have to be kind to you or nice to you in order for them to still be of value and be somebody that's worth knowing? Because sometimes that's hard, right? Sometimes we'll meet people that are a little more rough around the edges or who are not necessarily going out of their way to be nice, but we don't always know how to receive that because we take it personally, like they don't like me or they're mad at me, or are they not liking what I'm doing, when really it's just maybe they have a different approach to life. So how do we change the narrative, or does it have to be changed at all?
But something that I do actually really appreciate about kids, especially let's say elementary kids, is that they have absolutely no judgment. And I think it's because, when you're young, no one's enforcing values on you. I think the younger you are, the more you need to realize, firstly, what you're passionate about, right? I mean, the classical kid answers like, oh my gosh, I like dinosaurs, or I like to watch TV. Starting small and not telling kids this is also more of a subjective thing, but I'm pretty passionate about this, like telling girls you can't play with the dinosaurs, that's for boys, or boys you can't play with dolls, that's more of a girls thing. I think such restrictions like this really inhibits a kid's way of figuring out what they like, and that's the first step. And then when you start getting to school, that's where it becomes difficult, because I think with so many, there's just a lot of restrictions. especially as kids, you want to seem, older, but you're not. How would I fix this in school? I don't know.
Everything you're saying is definitely answering that question, because you even recognizing that, hey, I felt lonely, or hey, I felt pressure to be social even when I didn't want to be, or hey, I felt, it was so serious that I ended up, in the hospital. Like, these are, you talking about it is already going to make kids feel like that's a step, what those is a step towards what they can do, because just acknowledging that you can feel that way and you don't have to act on it in any one way is giving them permission to feel however they're feeling, and to know that there's a way to learn and grow and get out of that, right? And that it's not forever. Sometimes when you're younger, you think that's going to last forever, and it's just how it's going to.
Oh my gosh, I feel like my childhood is slipping away, and it's a little sad, but it's okay.
It's bittersweet. It's bittersweet, and that's very normal for you to feel, but that just means it's because you're preparing for the next step, right? And I really appreciated what you said about the model minority myth. And when it comes to any stereotype, I love the fact that you're talking about it and saying, hey, that's not me, because I think part of the stereotype, especially for Asian Americans, is that you kind of just go along with it, right? And you don't really.
Oh my gosh, I hate that. Oh my gosh, that's a whole different category of like Asian people usually go along with the standard. There was an incident, but did you hear about Christian Hall?
Yes.
Yeah. So I heard his dad talk about the whole incident. I was in shock, actually. I was in shock because part of me was like, people think of the model minority myth. Wait a second, it doesn't fit in. And then when he explained that maybe the police were like, oh, most Asian Americans are usually calm and quote unquote submissive and tend to follow the rules. And I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And that is so, so sad, because I think challenging stereotypes,
that's it,
is possibly the best thing you could do. When I walk in the streets as an Asian American woman, I carry pepper spray with me. Partly because I'm in fear, but also secondly because if I start waving this thing around, they're gonna know, hold up, maybe not today. Yeah. And I like to bring up the fact that a quote unquote a 90 is a good score, and maybe other people around me are like, oh my gosh, a 90, I can't believe it, this sucks, my life is over. I'll be like, listen, in 10 years time, this isn't gonna affect you, I promise.
Even with that, I just keep telling kids and myself that as long as do I think it's a good grade, yeah, then that's all that matters, right? And it's not that simple, and I know that, because then other people's opinions come into your mind in your conversations. You get an idea of what they think is smart or what they think is successful, and then you're like, wait a minute, okay, and it shakes you. But I ultimately really believe that that's the test of really how well do I really know myself, that no matter what anyone else says to me, I know my truth and I know what's what for me.
Everyone is capable of different things, like there's people who are so good at instruments, I can't even comprehend it.
So good.
So much respect. Oh my gosh. And there's people who, can type fast or can do other things fast. There's different things that people are capable of, and I think everyone just wants to go for what is socially.
There's like a societal idea of what success is, and that's what we try to chase without realizing that that's
not right for me.
For everyone. Exactly. How would you encourage individuality in students or kids? So you said you wish you had learned it sooner, right? So as a teacher, how could I encourage my students to feel comfortable saying, I got a B and I'm good with that, or I failed and I'm okay with that because I'll learn next time?
This is difficult because everyone is different, right? I think there's some, popular options such as, oh, let's have a whole class gathering, but not everyone necessarily likes to, talk with strangers. Exactly. Yeah. Like some people might just be a little bit more quiet, and that's fine, Personally, at the pre-college program I was at, everyone was awkward. It was like a 12 people group, and we still talk. It's been like half a week, and we're still talking. It took us maybe 2 days before everyone was like finally okay with each other. We went around, explain our names, explain a hobby, and everyone is awkward. We don't really want to talk. We're like, we're just here for the program, maybe for like the uh, college application, but that's it. Like, don't talk to me. Everyone was definitely like that. I know that for me, I took a really long time to open up. I was like, nah, I'm gonna leave here in a week. That's not really it for me. We had 2 extroverts who were roommates just start talking to everyone and made us feel awkward, but that awkwardness made us all laugh. And so I think sometimes you need to put yourself in awkward situations and just sort of laugh it off. Yeah. That's obviously hard as kids because everyone doesn't want to be awkward. But for me personally, I get in a lot of embarrassing incidents. Yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing, but then when I look back on it, it's like, oh, everyone sort of bonded over that. That's okay. Sometimes you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in order to make yourself enjoy what's going on. You'll look back on it and be like, that was kind of endearing, But I think the more class discussions you have, first in small groups, then in larger groups, depending on the type of teacher you are too. What makes a good teacher that can really bond with students is if they create a place where no one's like scared to share their opinions with like being laughed at. That you need to find topics that people can get passionate about, such as bringing something up in like a classroom and then sort of having a discussion about it. Movie discussions are so fun though. When you when you have a book or a movie and it has like an open ending and everyone's talking about it, it's so fun.
Individuality is not just about what you look like or how you're hanging out. It's also just what you think about any particular topic, right? Being able to share your individual thoughts. When you get into the idea of individuality, what about when someone's individuality then interferes with someone else's? So if somebody's individual thought or opinion is one that is maybe offensive to somebody else, how do you still respect or honor both people's individuality?
So, I didn't grow up Christian, but when I moved here, I started going to a church. Do I consider myself a Christian? No, I don't. I think I don't like that the church. I don't like that religion is based off of fear. I think it's a little uncomfortable for me personally. I think it's a little uncomfortable. And I don't like it when people try to instill their like, I believe in this, so you should believe in this, because I just think it's right. Something that I think is really respectful in terms of religion is when someone's not religious, let's in my case Christian, you sort of need to learn that the world doesn't revolve around you. That sounds really rude, but I think it's something people need to come to terms with. Maybe you believe it, but for me, it becomes so uncomfortable that if I try to believe it, it just gives me anxiety.
So do you think that both people should still have the right to think whatever they think, even if it's discriminatory or offensive to someone else?
You can think what you want, but sometimes it's not necessary to try and share everything with others. You need to keep that private space. And I think that's what creates a safe environment. You can always find other things that you agree upon.
Do you think that fear or anger, as justified as it might be for somebody who has maybe been mistreated or somebody who has been kind of marginalized or overlooked, whether individually or as a community or as a group, do you think that anger and fear is the right way or a great motivator to create change, or do you think there's another way to do that?
No, definitely not. When you use fear and anger to try and, I think the most common example is like discipline your children, right? With some parents hit their kids if they do something wrong. Some parents will just lecture them for hours. but I think using aggressive tactics in order to like put a rule to something is not only does that cause trauma for quite a lot of kids, but then it makes you realize, when you think from the kids' point of view, you're just forcing something on them. They might not necessarily, believe that, but they're only doing it because you're scaring them. Right. And that's also when you start thinking about like child development, because for me personally, I went through a really bad experience once. It was not my parents, it was something else, but now because of that, whenever people are like yelling or screaming, I just can't really hear anything that well.
You kind of shut down, right?
I shut down. It's really hard for me to function when that happens. It's not healthy, and it's not a good way to tell your kids this is something wrong, because now they're thinking that's dangerous.
Right. And the reason that I brought that up or I asked is because I do think that ties into our individuality, or when I think about how do we really know ourselves, it's also knowing how you communicate when you're angry and how you communicate when you're, sad or frustrated, because if you take out your own fears on someone else or take out your own anger on someone else, then you're just creating a vicious cycle. So learning about what makes us upset or how we show our anger, and learning healthy ways to do that and healthy ways to create a change that you're looking to create, I think is an important thing to start thinking about when you're younger.
Yeah, because when you're a child, you tend to make associations, I think. And so when you, as referred to before, when you discipline your kids with, if you steal a cookie from the cookie jar, I'm going to yell at you for, like, I don't know, like 10 minutes. Then they're going to associate it. Every time I'm going to reach for something like that, there's, like, a probability that might happen. And then,
right.
Yeah, when you learn to associate that, then it becomes a non-stop cycle, and you just can't get rid of it, because now you're like, as long as I do this, then I won't be in trouble. Nothing quote unquote bad will happen. And that's where like the unhealthy cycle comes in.
I also think it's tricky if you grew up in a certain type of household, and then you're going to attract those same type of friends, probably, right?
Yeah.
So I think what's scary as a teacher, or just as a human for me, is when you see that people don't even realize that their approach is unhealthy, because it's just reinforced. Asking ourselves how we are moving through the world and making decisions, and what type of consequences are we creating. Hoping people will ask themselves that, because that's the only way to recognize if what you're doing is kind of on a healthier path as opposed to just repeating cycles.
Do you ever have these moments where you have a habit of doing something, and then you see that someone else doesn't do it, and you're like, wait a second, people don't do that?
Yes, absolutely.
And I think when you start to realize that not everyone's the same, you definitely start to realize, like, oh, maybe there are differences in that sense.
So true that we tend to get very narrow-minded about certain things.
There's a lot of, bad reputation from social media when you see, like, models, and they have, the societal expectation of, like, some slim waist, wide hips. Personally, I don't have that body type. When you go on, like, social media outlets such as TikTok, and you start to see people that are similar like you, it makes you feel so appreciated. You're like, oh, I am seen, period. And something that TikTok definitely helped me realize is, like, you can wear what you want. Why are you trying to wear the things that you thought people would like you?
I think that's changing now, and that's really nice.
I'm so happy to see it. I am so happy to see it. And something that's not touched upon a lot is also sexuality. I think there's a lot of people who are like, for some reason, there's more gay people. Like, personally, I am part of that community. Personally, I haven't really. This is so funny. This is going to be put on. I don't care if this is put on YouTube or not. But I haven't really come out to a lot of my friends. So I'm omni, and that's not really that well known. And it took me a really long time to come to terms with it, because not only was it uncomfortable for me to be like, I'm Christian. Wait. And then I went through that phase for me to finally be comfortable because I saw other people in my community. And I was like, oh, so this sort of feeling isn't actually isolated. But social media, again, is really creating an environment of you're valid, like you're appreciated, we see you. And that's something that I really like, especially about TikTok, because that, like, when you make something, that goes everywhere.
What do you think it is about? What do you think it is about TikTok that has made you feel validated in a way that maybe you weren't before? Is it just seeing other people talk about their own individuality? Is it seeing people that you identify with, or is it all of that?
When you're on the For You page, right? That whole page is because of things that you like to post on. And so naturally you start to see things that you're interested in on the For You page. And when I see things that I personally like, what things I like to wear, things I like to do, or the type of, I'm a big K-pop person too, like, you know, just K-pop fan cams that I didn't feel like people also like to listen to, and you start to see like this come up, and you're like, oh my gosh, 100K likes or 600K likes. It sort of makes you realize, oh, like it's not just me who likes it. Yeah, maybe the people in my school don't necessarily say
Your school is not the whole world. Yes,
exactly.
That's a great perspective to remember too for young kids, is that whatever they think their circumstances are right now, that's not at all permanent. It's always changing. And the world is very, very big if you need it to be, and very small if you need it to be.
Yeah, exactly. So I think TikTok made, this sounds really cliche again, but like made my world sort of become bigger or become a little bit more validating, if that makes sense. I get a lot of compliments sometimes when I'm out. They're like, oh my gosh, I like your outfit. Like, where'd you get it? I'm like, hey, let me tell you where I got my things. But like,
Isn't that the best feeling? It's the best feeling.
It is the best feeling because you're like, I'm wearing something that I like and I'm getting compliments for it. Absolute slay. It's so good. Exactly. But I think being comfortable with yourself really helps you sort of determine, I like this and I don't like this, and that's okay.
Knowing what you like and don't like while not making others feel badly for what they like or just don't like, right? I think that's the nice balance that we want to ultimately encourage.
Quarantine was definitely a big individuality moment because I'm by myself. I was like, what do I even like to do these days? I'm so boring. What am I doing? Like, I was literally on YouTube the entire day. I didn't know what I wanted either, you know. And I think just over time, like the more free time I started to have, you know, after classes, because school ended earlier at that time, the more I was sort of figuring out what I like to do, what I like to wear, because it's not like I was going to go to school. No one could judge me whatever I was going to wear because it was my house.
Right.
And that definitely helped me a lot. In terms of like, I needed to spend alone time with myself in order to figure out what I liked.
That is key. That is key. And not because you're forced to be alone, but because you're choosing to be alone and figure out what it is that you need to do.
Then again, that's for me. I'm a good introvert. For extroverts, maybe you just can't be alone all the time by yourself because you get more energy by being around other people. Then, you know.
But I still think that even extroverts have their introverted moments. And I don't think anyone, and I don't think anyone can be around other. I understand what you mean about people. They need their energy from other people. But do you think that sometimes that's also because they're avoiding something else?
Oh, definitely. This is so funny. Introverts are by themselves because they want to avoid other people and their issues. And then extroverts need to be by other people because they want to distract themselves. And I think that's so interesting when you look at like each person's habit. But no, everyone is definitely different in that sense. Do I think extroverts are just wired to, you know, just always want to be around people? No, definitely not. Definitely need their own time.
Yeah, and the only reason I bring that up is because I think at the root, at the core, all of us, we just want to feel validated. And the irony is the only person's validation that you really need is your own. That's the irony of it.
It's so funny because everyone is like, I really want to fit in, but in the end, if you don't think you fit in yourself, then you're never going to get that
wherever you are, as long as you own yourself. And but it takes time to get there. It's a journey.
Yes,
and you are
definitely.
definitely on that direction. And I'm so proud of you for that. So proud of you. That's amazing. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
I don't talk about this a lot, but like, I don't really like talking about what I'm bad at, simply because I don't want people to know that I'm weak. I'm just kidding.
You're cute.
No, I don't really talk about myself that much, so I think this is really nice. But I'm actually really worried about next year, because I'm really worried about if I'll get accepted to college. I'm sure I will be, but I really want to go to this one college.
Okay.
So that's why. Yeah, I'm really worried about the next year. So hopefully, in a year, I'll be in college.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to jinx anything. Well, I know I'll be going to college. I just really want to go to one.
Feeling scared and unsure about your future, where you are, is exactly where you're supposed to be. That is very
definitely.
you have everything you need in order to be successful, and I'm so proud of you for that. But I get it. It's very scary right now for you.
It's so scary. I'm so anxious.
The beginning is always the most intimidating part.
I know.
And
I'm so scared. Oh my god.
Yeah, I think get over that real quick.
Yeah.
And if you're ever feeling like you just want to talk, shoot me an email. We can always make that happen. Okay. Thank you for doing this. I really.
No, I really appreciate it. It was so fun. I was really scared at first, but it turned out fine.
I told you. I told you. Thank you, Stephanie. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.